Good morning, manual artists. I'm going to make this little video because some of you obviously are unable to come in and to enjoy and learn about the process of milling lumber in person. It's been a pleasure to do it just at least once now with Arjan and Cole, and with Daniel, and with Ryan Chipperfield, and with Daniel. I already said that. Daniel, Jono also. And we ran some material through table saw and through thickness planer to turn wood that was either rough sawn and just needed to be planed smooth, or it was the wrong dimension, so we kind of narrow it down with the thickness planer, or is such a wrong dimension that we ran it through a table saw to make it the proper dimension. So anyway, I'm going to talk about some of that stuff today. All right. So first thing I want to talk about is species. So these are hardwoods, and these are kind of like, if not, they're not exotic exactly, but they're like furniture type of hardwoods, the kind that people use to make all sorts of fancy things and finished things. So what we have here is some cherry, and I have a bunch of this, and this is rough sawn cherry. And you can see, if I put it on edge here, I think you can see there are saw kerfs, and we talked about this. They kind of have a circular shape to them. You can kind of see them, and that's because the blade that this was cut it out of the log was big. It's probably like 3 or 4 feet in diameter. So one of the things we need to do is to just remove those saw kerfs. But it's also very uneven just in terms of its thickness, so we need to get it to a consistent thickness. So there's cherry, and I showed you guys when you were here visiting before example of some black cherries that grow on the property here. That's a local. This is grown in Annapolis. It's a really beautiful color. It's a nice hardwood, so it takes an edge really well. And I also have a whole bunch of this that I got, which is not local at all. This is called mahogany, and this is this mahogany is from a lot of places. Hello, Oscar. This is, you can get this mahogany from the Philippines, from Africa, from South America, and so this is 2-inch mahogany that we're going to cut down and plane. Again, you can see it's rough sawn, but in this case, you can see the kerfs. I don't know if you can, I think you can see that the kerfs are actually parallel to each other, because this was cut with a bandsaw mill. That's a kind of a more mod and more efficient way to mill up logs into material, because the kerf that's removed is so much smaller, and it's a little more precise. So 2 species that we have to work on: cherry, local, reddish color, and mahogany, an exotic that's also has a little bit of reddish color, but the grain isn't nearly as interesting as cherry. Okay, so that's the first part, species. And just by the way, there's lots of different kinds of each of those too. There's different kinds of cherries and different kinds of mahoganies. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is so these, as I mentioned in the well, anyway, whatever. You can't, when you cut a tree down like I did in that video, you've created wood that is green, right? It's wet. It still has all the sap in it. It was alive just minutes ago. Right, so it's wet, and you don't generally work doing the kind of things we're doing with wet wood, with green wood. So you have to dry it, and there's 2 basic ways to dry it. One is air drying, and the other is kiln drying. And so drying, back to drying. Kiln drying and air drying. Kiln drying are these big industrial facilities. They have basically these big ovens that they stick wood in, and they essentially cook off the vapor or the water in the wood till it's the proper has the proper moisture content. Okay, air drying does the same thing, but it just uses the differential in air humidity to just take away the air, and so I'm sorry, take away the moisture. And so these would be just kind of layered up with little spacers in between, which are called stickers, in order that air can flow around a big pile of lumber, and then over time it would dry. Now the thing is, so I was pointing out to those who were here the other day. You know, remember, wood tree is basically just kind of a bundle of straws in a way, right? It's got the xylem and phloem. It's like the capillary system, which gets moisture, water, nutrients up and down from the roots, and sugars, and just moves things around. So because of that, wood tends to dry out the ends, the end grain, because that's where basically the straws open up, right? You understand what I'm saying? Like this is the tree originally, and so the things will be moving up and down this way, so that when you make it into a piece of lumber, the moisture wants to move out that way. And the problem is, if it moves out too quickly, it distorts the wood, or if there's different kinds of wood in the tree, which I'll talk about in a second, it'll also dry at different rates and things will move. And so you can see air-dried lumber tends to move, we call it, much more radically, and that's why it's not usually as good for our purposes. So it takes a little more time to mill it properly, because it'll get, like you can see this one has a twist to it. You can see it's not sitting in one plane. Sometimes the ends will dry quickly, so they'll split. It's called checking. And sometimes people, and the person who did this did a bad job, but they I don't know if you can see, it's got a sort of stain here. You try to seal the ends so that the air can only, or the moisture can only come out through the at right angles to the little straws, and that tends to dry more slowly, and the wood moves less, and you have a better product in the end. So all right, so we get kiln drying, air drying. Like I said, there's lots of different ways that wood can move. Right? It can twist, it can crown, or warp, like kind of in a curve this way. It can cup. That's what we see a lot of times, where it actually like have a sort of C shape, and you got to plan that out. Whereas if you look at this piece right here, it's pretty almost entirely rectilinear, but it's not necessarily perfectly in the dimension that we want. So we're going to work on that. So look at that website I loaded just for all the different terms: checking, warping, cupping, twisting. What I want to talk about now is using a table saw to do what's called resawing. You can also resaw with a big bandsaw, but we don't have anything like that here. There's a place I do wood turning where they have a big old bandsaw, and I may try to videotape myself doing it there. But today what we're going to do is do a little resawing with a table saw. And again, several of you guys have already done this. So here's a table saw. This is quite a dangerous tool. You've got to know precisely how to use it, because you definitely can get hurt on this thing. But what I want to show, generally a table saw is for taking a board that's and cutting it in this orientation that's flat, and you just want to make it from one width to another. Now, so this one right here is like 4 inches, and let's say I want to make it 2 inches. I would do is I unlock my fence. That's just called the fence right here. It slides back and forth, and then you slide wood along it. So let's say I want to make it 2 inches, right? And then I lock the fence, turn it on. And if you remember, we all should know this, that's called a rip cut, all right? You're ripping the board. But that's not what I want to do today. What I want to do today instead is to show you guys how to do another thing, which is to resaw a board, where you're going to cut it in this orientation to make a big board into maybe several narrower boards. Like I said, I have a bunch of 2-inch mahogany, which is way too thick for what we want to do, but I don't want to like plane it all down, turn it all into sawdust, so I'm going to resaw it. And I'll show you in a second. Cole and Ariane and I did a really nice one the other day. I'll give you an example of that. Now, I wanted to say, table saws, there's like a million different things. Basically, they're designed for ripping wood, but there's lots and lots of things you can do, which I'll show you later on this year, and hopefully we're all going to be here at some point. But let me show you some things. So this is a piece of 2-inch mahogany. It's like 2 by 6. It's like a full 2-inch by a full 6. But that's just like too fat for anything that we're going to do. So what we did the other day, hold that thought, we ran it, okay, so this used to be 2 by 6. But what we did is we ran it through this table saw and now turned it into a thinner plank and then a little bigger one. So I'll do the same with this. I think this one came out to be about 9/16. Some of you guys are doing more finished things. You aren't building necessarily like a tote for tools. This material would do the whole thing. This is a nice probably 9/16, 5/8 by 6, and it's probably almost 6 feet long. So there's plenty of material right there. So the way I do this though is I'm gonna buzz one out of this. So this is a big old giant piece, not much use for you. I'm gonna cut it. Now this is just a small tabletop saw. It's like good for moving around. So this is not really like designed for. I can do it, but it's not particularly designed for this. But I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna set this at a little more than 3/4, so I leave a little bit for myself to plane it. But actually, before I do that, I'm gonna square up the edges because it has to sit this way as it goes through. So if these two edges aren't really square, then it could be tilted, and then my cut will be off. So I'm gonna do that first. This is a full 6 inches. I'm gonna buzz it at like say 5 7/8. Take off some, and then before I run it through, I always check and see which is the straighter side, and that's the one I'll run alongside the fence. So this side's pretty straight. And if there's a cup, you put the cup down. It tends to rock less. And you want to set the height of the blade, obviously, to the thickness of the board. Here we go. I hope you understood why I did that. Okay. So as I say, hair over 3/4, 16th over 3/4 is 13/16. All right. Lock it down. There's a little cup to it. Let's see that. There's a little cup to it. You see that? It kind of has a hump like that. I got to be aware of that. I'm gonna run it with the cup towards the fence. Actually, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this in better order. I should take that cup out of it before I do this. Otherwise, it'll mess this up. So I'm going to pause this for a minute and go and do my and grab my thickness planer, which can remove that cup, and then we'll resaw. That's kind of how the way it works. You know, when you're doing milling, you have to get rid of some of the wood, unfortunately, in order to get it to a proper dimension. You got parallel sides, but just like we're working, as I said the other day, you should never forget this. You know, woodworking, you're working with something that's dynamic, that's organic, right? It was alive, so it has all sorts of the properties of living things, which is like unpredictability and irregularity and that sort of thing. You're not working with a piece of steel, which is, you know, like mineral. It's pretty regular. And so you have to account for the fact that wood was alive, and so there are properties it has that makes it kind of hard to work with sometimes. But yes, it's part of the program. All right, so I'm gonna pause. All right, so I've retooled here to have my thickness planer. And again, this is a tabletop version. You know, in a real shop where they're producing, you know, lots and lots of this material, doing a lot of milling. You can see a bigger, giant cast iron thing that sits on the ground. This is a tabletop one. So perfect for us, though. And you can adjust the height with this thing. That's up that raises and lowers the cutters. And the cutters are a cylinder with 3 bars that run the length of the cylinder, which are then blades, and they spin like this. And so it rides along this surface, this flat plane, and then it takes it off the top. In a line that's parallel to this. So you'll notice when I run this thing through it first, because it's got a cup, it won't take all of it off. It just reduces the irregularity little by little. You can run it at different speeds. This is 90 cuts per inch or 60 cuts per inch. It says finishing or dimensioning. Well, we're dimensioning right now. We're not trying to worry about its finish. We're trying to get it to be the right size and shape. So that's what we're doing. This is the on-off button. So several of you have done this or seen it done, but not everybody. So I'm gonna set it to the proper height and run that thing through, and you'll see that it will take it from rough sawn to smooth, but that's not really what I'm worried about. I really want to get it to the right shape so I can resaw it. Okay, so hold on. All right, so I've got the cutters zeroed in at the right height, and I'm going to run it through cup down. So it's going to be like this, and you'll see it'll take it off the middle to try to flatten it, and then I'll do that a couple times, and then I'll run it the other way, because then that'll be flat, and then it'll take the cup out of it. You'll see. Notice how nice and smooth that is, as opposed to this side, right? This is rough sawn, and this is finished for the most part. But more importantly, it had a hump on it like that. Now it's pretty good and flat. I can take a straight edge, for instance. It's just a piece of wood, but when I run along the straight edge, you can see there's no humping. Whereas if you look on this side, I can see a gap. Let me see if I can show you this. Watch this. Yeah, you can see that. Look at the gap. See all that daylight you see in the middle, but you don't see on the ends? Here, let me see if I can. Yeah, there you go. You can see it. It's hitting here, and it's hitting here, but in the middle, it's not hitting at all. So that's called a cup. And I'm gonna, now that I have this side flat, you can see you can't really see much daylight when I put it there at all. Maybe a little bit, actually. I think I may run it through a little bit more. No, I'm wrong. That's good. All right, so we should be able to take that that cup out of there, and you'll see in a minute. I'm gonna lower the blade of hair, turn it on, and run it through. So you can see now, I trust you can see that I took out most of the cup. You can see it's still a little rough on the middle. I can take it down a little bit more, maybe I will. But generally, you can see that what I've done here, I'm going to put this back on here. Look at that. See all that daylight we saw before? It's all gone, right? There's no gap, except just a little maybe, no, not really at all. I'm going to run through one more to get rid of that stuff there, and then we're going to resaw it. Holy cow. It's not easy to do that by yourself. I shouldn't be doing this stuff by myself. I should have you here. Anyway, that's now we got a beautiful board. It's no longer 2 inches thick, of course. Right now it's like 1 and 15/16. Must have been a hair over 2. We removed some. It's nice, pretty nice and finished. It's squared all the way around. That's really important for the next step. We're going to continue to dimension this by resawing. See us. Okay, we're back. Got the table saw set up. I think I got it set at the right width. And remember, this is not like a sawmill right here. This is a small, just job saw. So we've got to take it easy on her. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it through with maybe take out 2 inches. I'll spin it over, take out 2 inches, spin it over again, raise the blade, go. I'll raise it up to close to 3 inches, and then run it through, and then flip it over again, run it through. Mahogany is not as hard. At least this mahogany is not quite as hard as the cherry. It cuts a little bit more easily. But the harder the wood, you'll see when you start using a sharp chisel on it, it doesn't do that crushing problem that you have with the pine. It's harder to work with in a way, but it's also easier to work with in a way. Just takes an edge better. All right, so watch this. I'm going to resaw this and knock off from a 2-inch thick board a 3/4 inch one, and then we have material for your project. All right, here we go. Double check. Like I said, it's a fraction over 3/4, so we can run through the planer later on and finish it, not dimension it now, just finish it. All right, locked. Thank God Mr. Bond was here, because you're not here. It's very helpful to have another hand on the out feed, so someone can grab it and pull it and steady it. Anyway, so we had a 2-inch board. Now look, boom. We have a beautiful piece of 1x, right? So this is resawing, right? We took a big, thick piece of mahogany, which was not very useful to us, and we turned it into a 1x6, and I can get another one out of there, or I can get 2 half-inch pieces easily for some of those other projects you guys are doing. All right, so again, learn a little about species, about wood movement, about air drying, about how the thickness planer works, and how you can use a table saw to both rip, but also resaw. See you soon.